Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and, well, just me, Steve Lamack, this week, as our esteemed colleague Stuart Dredge is away on holiday, restlessly grappling with images of hamsters spinning plates, which will only make sense if you heard the last episode. In Stuart's absence, though, we do have, however, a guest joining us to, well, help us shed some light on what it's really like being a musician, attempting to maintain a career in pop music while remaining financially solvent if possible. Lucy Rose has released 5 albums, all of which have made the official UK album chart. She's played every major festival going, and 5 years ago she started her own record label to help other artists make their own way in the business. But Lucy's story it's something of a roller coaster, shall we say, and well, Lucy's learned a few lessons along the way, which I hope you find interesting and which might be valuable for other musicians, as you'll hear. Lucy, hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for talking to us, because I imagine you have been very busy for a number of reasons, not least having just released a new album, which we'll get to later. But the reason I asked you to do this was because, do you remember, this goes back to a conversation which we had, well, some time ago now, after you were on the radio show, and we ended up in the pub afterwards putting the music world to rights. And I thought it would be quite interesting if other people could hear some of your thoughts on the music business and some of the stories you have to tell. Because, I mean, the record industry, it's nothing if not full of pitfalls, isn't it? And it's a learning curve which never seems to straighten out.
Yeah, exactly. It's constantly changing and evolving, and you as an artist has to go along with it most of the time. But I do feel probably more positive than I maybe did in that pub that one time we chatted.
This is a daft question, I know, but how different would your career path have been if you knew back at the start what you know now? Would it have been much different?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I went into it not listening to many people in a way which was like, I know who I am. I don't want to be styled. I don't want my music to be compromised. And that they did at some point, that, I don't know, youthful exuberance of believing in yourself was worn down. And then I started making decisions, listening to the advice, the professionals in the industry. They know what they're doing. And then I realized that they actually didn't. And that was a real waste of time. And then I went back to just doing my own thing again. So it probably would have changed that period of time because, yeah, it wasn't good for me, really.
We should set the scene to go. So if we go back to the very start, you bought your first guitar when you were still at school, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But didn't wrote some songs, didn't play them to anyone. Left school instead of going to university, which you could have done. You ended up going to London and hanging out with other musicians.
Yeah.
Is that about the right? Okay.
Yeah.
As a summary. So when you were hanging around with other musicians in London, what was the thought process? I just want to go and make some music, meet some people, and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, thought process was just, I want to be a singer-songwriter. I've written these songs. I want to play them to people. Doing an open mic every night, meeting other musicians, starting playing music with other musicians, and I really just thought I was on a journey to doing what I wanted to do, really, and I was just going to work hard at it. It was as simple as that.
But how did you make ends meet? What did you do? Did you have to get part-time jobs? Because I don't suppose those open mics don't pay.
Yeah, I had a job at Caramillan, which seems so unlike me. Only place that would take me. So I worked there. I crashed on my sister's couches for, I think, at least a year, 6 months each to start with, because they were living down there. So that was really fortunate I could do that. And then I started putting on nights myself. There was like a open mic sort of promotions company called Ear Music that did like the Old Queen's Head and King's Cross. There was like a pub there. There was a few. Monkey Chews was my absolute favourite. We used to do that in Chalk Farm. But and they just said, oh, why don't you start doing a night here, a couple of nights a week? So I started working, putting nights on with the musicians that I'd made friends with making money that way. But that was great because I got to book bands and see bands play, and it felt really good.
Yeah, and I suppose there's you build a community that way as well, and you share experiences, which I think is sometimes valuable.
Oh, definitely. And you get inspiration. Like I really think that's where like most of my inspiration came from, was watching other people get up on the mic and play their songs night after night, sometimes in front of
Mm.
bigger crowds, sometimes in front of small crowds. But yeah, like we had a whole different range of people. Like Ed Sheeran would come all the time, and it didn't matter if there was like five people in the pub or 100, he would just always perform and do a great job, in my opinion. So it was made me give you ammunition to like go home and work really hard, seeing all these other people just working really hard at it as well.
Mm. So at some point, and I don't know how long it takes before this happens, but you better explain the story behind it. At some point, you get offered a record deal by the major label Columbia Records. How did that happen?
It's a long old journey. I mean, I remember them even telling me when they offered me a deal, I don't know if it's when I signed it, that they were looking through their like A&R books because they had younger A&Rs going out looking at musicians all the time, that a couple of them had seen me play numerous times and had in the meeting just said like, no, not good enough, like not for us, like written me off. And that was like in the sort of notes. And then it came around to them like offering me a deal. So it definitely was no easy thing. They had written me off a few times. And
Mm.
at that point, we'd started like releasing music. I found a producer that was brilliant who was doing it for the love to start with. You know, it was sort of like a back end deal of like, if this comes off, you know, hopefully I can pay you if I get a deal or something. Same with the musicians, like everyone was doing it for the love of it. Started making music that turned into an album. Did it at my parents' house, you know, like asked if we could use their living room. And at that point, I think Radio One put me on the playlist, which was quite a big deal. It was like an unsigned artist. And yeah, I got put on the playlist at Radio One, and I was selling out Cargo in London, which was like 500 capacity. So I had built like a fan base and something that felt exciting before anyone got involved. So that was all happening. And then I remember doing, you know, like the Barfly and the Jazz Cafe, and that was all part of like Fly magazine. I was at the cover of that. And there was these exciting things happening. And then, yeah, I think I got like 4 or 5 offers from majors within 1 week. It was like they all decided unanimously that they were going
Mm.
to have a little battle over me, but it
Yeah,
came out of nowhere.
there is that. As soon as one person puts an offer in, everyone else thinks they're missing out all of a sudden.
That's
So
exactly
the
what
offers
happened. It
come
was
from them.
quiet
Yeah.
for, 5, 6 years. And then, yeah.
And did you have a manager at the time? Did you have somebody helping you out?
Yeah, at the time I had a manager who was brilliant, and he was managing a band called Razorlight. So I had done like quite a lot of touring with them around the world. That was, sorry, I've got a clock with a bird, by the way, Steve. Sorry about that. It's like I should have thrown it out before this. Um, but yeah, I had a manager who was helping me, especially with the releasing of the music. He sort of set up a little label um, and helped, put the music out.
So, how did you make the decision? Was on which label to sign for? Was it based on the terms of the offer, financially, or was it based on something else, the freedom they were going to give you? Was there much disparity in terms of how much money one would offer or the other?
I think they were pretty similar across the board. So then it just came to like personalities. And I did sign to Columbia because there was a lady who was the MD called Alison Donald, and she just seemed like wildly passionate about it. Like she caught me having lunch with another label and was like, really like took me to one side, like, what are you doing? Like, this is our fate, we have to work together. Like, it was very, very intense. Um, and Columbia, yeah, they were a big, exciting label, but yeah, I went for it.
So you did two albums with Columbia, both of which make the top 20. You did all the big festivals at the time. Your music ends up on TV shows. I mean, you're living the dream, I imagine, over well, at least from the outside, that's what it appears.
It was huge
I don't know
disappointment.
if it was.
It's like for them, seriously, I feel like every meeting I had from the point of signing pen to paper was, we're disappointed it's not doing better. So from my perspective, yeah, I was living the dream. It's like my first record went in, top 20. I think I can't remember where it went, sort of top 15 or something. And I was selling out Shepherd's Bush Empire. People were coming to my gigs all around the UK and also internationally. People were coming to see me. So I was like, this is it. It's happening. I'm so excited. Like album one, this is like first step in the right direction. And then every meeting was like, we expected more from this record. We hoped for more. We are disappointed. And that was really difficult because, yeah, it just made me feel like a failure all the time, really. And I don't know if that is just like major labels' expectations are to be huge, huge. But it was really difficult. But then it definitely gave them sort of the power going into album two, like this whole rhetoric of them being disappointed. It's not doing very well. This isn't feeling good for us. Maybe we'll continue working with you. Maybe we won't. The power like completely shifted at that point into their hands. And then it was sort of, I had to be grateful they wanted to do another record with me, and I had to be, go along with what they wanted and how many songs they needed and which songs they thought should go on. Suddenly I felt like I was like losing a lot of my creative freedom along the way.
And they'll be saying things, I imagine, along the lines of how much they'll also be talking about how much money they're going to put into promoting it, I suppose, and marketing it. And, they want the record that they feel comfortable throwing some money at, do they?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, so I had a few friends all on labels at the same time. And I remember like, them getting like huge amounts of money for promotion and things. Like I had like a tour support with Counting Crows came up. Potentially, I think, great band. I was super excited. They were playing in front of like 5,000, 6,000 people a night. I was really keen to do it. My band are all, really understanding not having huge wages. It's not like I had like major session musicians and like everything was really small. We were staying on people's couches still. Like it couldn't have been more DIY still, even though we're on a major. And I think I needed about like £6,000 to make this month of touring work. And they just like flat out said no, like they wouldn't give me any money for it. And, in my contract, it's like, I think I had like £100,000 of tour support they were going to give me at points, but, they decide when that is. And unless I was going to sue them, their word was no. So then I had to sort of crowdfund that myself. I did like a load of acoustic shows in churches that I put on myself so I could try and get the money to then pay the band, do the gigs. So I didn't even really particularly feel like they were putting a lot of money or investing a lot of money in me particularly. So it was hard.
This is going to be so disappointing for music fans like myself who think, oh, at last Lucy Rose has got a few bob in her pocket. I don't know when your first royalty check comes through and whether you just stare at it and think, oh, I don't have to sleep on people's floors anymore, but maybe you do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from Columbia, I'll never get a royalty check, I imagine, from either of those two records because the nature of it is like a major label deal. It's like 80-20. I think my percentage was at 18%. But they would, wouldn't pay for that sort of stuff, but then they would do, I don't know, they could spend like £20,000 on tube posters or something, but it would all go on
your bill.
On my bill. So say over like two records, we're looking at like somewhere between 100 or £200,000 they've spent. My 18%, it's going to take a long time to pay that back, really. So yeah.
On top of this, and this is a slightly different point, but I don't know whether this was true in the music industry at that point, whether things have changed. Do you think being a female musician you were treated differently, and has that at all changed?
I don't know. My truthful answer is I didn't feel like it did, in all honesty. Because any of the things that I think of that were really horrible when it was suddenly started talking about the way you look and let's get you a stylist and let's do this and work on your look. But I know quite a few male musicians who were like same position or even worse, like let's get you a personal trainer to get you ripped because you're fat or something, like literally saying that. And that's just as bad, you know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it didn't feel like in that term of things, it made a difference. There's a couple of things that like happened that I remember just being like confused by was um at the time when I was singing with Bombay Bicycle Club, I just was always listening to like new music and met like Leanne La Havas doing open mics and things like that. So I remember introducing Leanne La Havas to Bombay Bicycle Club and saying this girl is absolutely like incredible. We were watching her stuff like some of her live videos backstage, and they were looking for a support, and I was like, you should get her to support.
Mm,
She would be amazing.
mm,
Same thing with Ray Morris when I was like, she should support as well. She's brilliant. And I needed a debt to cover me, and I put Ray forward. But I remember being in the street, and it was someone from EMI who worked with Leanne, who had had meetings with, I can't remember exactly if they put an offer down or not. He came up to me and said, oh, I heard that it was you that put Leanne forward for that Bombay gig. Like, that's amazing. It's been brilliant that she's doing it. He's like, I'm really surprised you did that because you're competitors. And I just remember being like
mm,
very, very confused about what that meant. Like we couldn't be more
mm,
different as musicians. So I just sort of came to the conclusion that the only thing that was similar about us is that we were both girls with guitars, and therefore
mm.
that put us in a box. And there was a few people, oh, we really want to sign you, but we've already signed a girl this year. I had a couple of those as well. And I just thought, like, I wonder how many men you've signed this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It won't be one for one, like as in it can't be just that. So a couple of things like that definitely made me think it was a bit
Yeah.
different.
Before the third album, two things happened. You moved labels, which we'll get to in a second. But wasn't that the time that you did that Latin America tour
Yeah.
where you just and I remember thinking at the time, this sounds crackers when you were explaining it to us. Yeah, it turns out I've got lots of fans around Latin America. So I've just posted a thing online and asked them if they want to put us on. I'll just go. You just went and did a tour. I mean, I don't know explain how it works, because it sounds like it's you in a backpack and a guitar and a lot of strangers' houses.
That's exactly what it was, to be honest. You summarized it perfectly. Yeah, I was and I was in a place of where, like we talked about, where it's like you're not doing well, this record's not reaching expectations. And then at the same time, I was like looking at comments on YouTube of these people saying, please come to Brazil, with like hundreds of people liking that comment, being like, what are they talking about? There's hundreds of people in Brazil that want me to play there. Like, that's madness for someone like me. And then every time I tried to do it through sort of business like ways of like with my booking agent or promoters, it was like, oh, you can't do that. Like, no one makes money there because it doesn't like that unless you're like playing an arena. It's just going to be a big loss, and etc. And then I just was like, me and Will, my partner, were wanting to go traveling anyway and have some time off. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be in all these places. I want to travel Latin America. It seems insane that I will be in these places where people are saying it would be like their dream to see me play and not play music for them. So put up a post and pretty much said, I've got like 8-10 weeks. I'm going to travel. If you want me to come to your town, all you have to do is let me stay with you. Find me somewhere to play. It has to be free entry, because so like third world countries here. So I didn't want to just play to the like 0.01%, especially if I was going to be going to this effort. Has to be free entry. And then I'll come. And then I just replied to everybody that got in contact and went and did it.
When you come back, so you change, you leave Colombia,
Yeah.
and you move to Communion Records. So you left Colombia. It sounds like it was a difficult relationship. Was that the main reason for wanting to go somewhere else? That you needed a different working relationship with somebody?
Yeah. It was, to be honest, it was really dysfunctional. And since then, like the senior head of A&R I've talked to afterwards, and he was sort of said to me, like, out of everything I've ever worked on, I don't think I've ever felt like we've let down or labels let down an artist more. than how we let you down. And it was just like all of the ideas that I thought were great, like going to Latin America, like doing this, it was just like, bad idea, don't do that. Like, sit in the box. If I had like, I had music video ideas where I wanted to like climb a mountain in Patagonia with like my biggest fan and have this like crazy experience, because you
Mm.
had this like £10,000 budget they're willing to spend, and they were like, no, I think we just want you in a studio with lights on and do something generic. So yeah, they just fought me on everything. Like, there was not a single idea I brought to the table that they allowed me to do. And I don't know, it felt just like controlling. So it was just bad for everyone, really, at the end, because I was just super unhappy. And from talking to him, I think that he felt it would just, yeah, it become dysfunctional, that they should have just like allowed me to just do what I wanted to do a bit more.
Mm.
And then I do remember I had a manager still at the time, the same one, going into communion because it felt like the right world for me, and them saying actually they weren't interested before South America, before I did the Latin America trip. They'd sort of said like, thanks for coming, but it's probably not for us. I was like, okay. And then I just decided, I just went a bit mad, and I decided to just have a clean slate, and had to have a difficult conversation with my manager and said I didn't want to work together anymore. So my booking agent, I just went completely feral and didn't have a label, didn't have management, didn't have booking agent, everything you kind of work towards as an artist. It was like all stripped away and gone. And packed my backpack and did this Latin America trip, and that completely restored me, because I'd be in Sao Paulo and there'd be 2,000 people on the street trying to hear me play, and that restored my confidence. My partner Will filmed a load of it. I came back and I actually just spoke to Communion because they'd just done some documentaries with Bears Den and Ben Howard, sort of travel ones. So I was just asking them like, oh, how do you think I can sort of service this like in some way? It wasn't about going and asking for a deal. And then I think they just changed their mind. And the next thing I knew, they were like, we do really want to work with you. So it was quite funny because I went in with a manager and this team. They weren't keen. And then I came in like this complete like maverick musician with nothing around me, no team. And they were like, now we want to work with you. So that was quite interesting. Yeah.
And not only work with you and release your records, but then said, or I don't, or you asked them, I don't know how this happened, but you end up starting your own record label through Communion. Was that something you'd always wanted to do? Does that hark back to where you were when you were putting on open mic nights, that you just wanted to give other artists a leg up? Or did you want to prove the music industry wrong and show them how a label should be run?
God, no. I mean, it's no. To be honest, like I actually had no ambition to have a label in any capacity. I think the nature of not having a manager has been really, really, really good for me, because I've been able to learn really how it works. And like for me, like knowledge is power. Like if I know what my career, why the reasons we're doing things, and these are strategic ideas, and this is what works, then I feel like empowered uh, to be able to like do the very best job I can as an artist. So not having management just enabled me to learn a load. And then there was someone called Tamino, who's just like the most amazing artist that I'd done some gigs with, and I'd said to Communion, like, you have to sign Tamino. He's just insane. Um, and then I think they didn't check it out straight away. And then I pestered them like, have you not? You're missing out here. And then they did go and listen. And then the next day, I think Kev from Communion flew to Belgium, and then they signed him. And then Samantha Crane was the next person where I just was so in love with her music and her attitude and who she is as a person. I had her on tour with me, and Communion came to the gigs, and I made them like sit and watch her with me. Like, you have to watch her. She deserves to be cared about. Her music does, like all of it. And at that point, they were like, we've actually been thinking you should have your own label and you can sign whoever you want. And I think I said no for about a year or a year and a half. Like, that's the last thing I want to do, is become a label. And then they came to Brighton. It's a combination of them. They came to Brighton and they sort of really, sold it in a nice way to me. And also on top of that, Samantha Crane, she was on the side like, do it and sign me to your label. Come on, let's go. And I was like, Samantha, I could be terrible. Like, I might be crap at this. Like, I'm really worried. She was like, no, let's do it. So it was that combination of like belief from either side
Mm.
that made me like, okay, let's
And
try.
and has it been eye-opening? Do you get involved enough to realise that actually it's quite complicated and balancing the books is it's quite tricky?
You don't want to know what I think about it, honestly.
Okay.
Well,
Right.
I'll be here all day, but I don't know. It's really illuminating to have been on the artist side for however many years I've been doing it, and now seeing it from the label perspective, I'm just like, it's really illuminating because it's not black and white. I think there is like a sort of like idea that, the labels can be the bad guys and the musicians are not, getting what they need or the support or everything. But just finding like just the amount of money it takes to release something properly is so enormous, and there's so much unknown about it that at like some point you have to say no to certain things. I've had to say, and there's lots of compromises, and it's really difficult because you want to say yes to everything. Just like, for example, there's someone who wanted to do South by Southwest, and I said at the beginning, because I was covering like USPR, I could cover the USPR, which is X amount of money, but in terms of tour sport, I just don't have the funds available to do both. And it was sort of like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna cover the touring part that's all under control. And then like week before, it's like, actually everything's fallen through, and can you give us this money to do it? And it was the week before, and I just even now don't know, like it's like so difficult. It's like where do I magic it all from? And it comes, and this was our agreement, was you were covering this and I was covering this, so there's part of me that's sort of like, we agreed this months ago. And then I said no, and then it became this, like, it felt like it became this big deal in a way, like, this artist couldn't do it, and then did a post explaining I couldn't do it, I didn't get tour support from my label, this is the reasons. And I was like, oh man, I was like a bit bummed out because realistically, this is a complete passion project for me, and probably 80% of my time and energy goes on artists on my label, not my own music. And it's literally for no, I'm not, getting any revenue back from the nature of it, because I'm spending money on all these artists that I need to pay back first. And then I still feel like I'm coming out like I'm doing, like it's I could be doing more, and that's really, really
Mm.
difficult.
Yeah, it is frustrating. Well, particularly when you believe in an artist in a way that you want the very best for them, and sometimes you feel your hands are tied. I mean, I remember that from running a record label myself. But you can never. There are just some things you just cannot do. Before you build some momentum around it, it is very tricky, and it's I mean trickier even now. I mean, you've lived through the era of selling CDs probably, for 12 quid, and now we're increasingly reliant. Obviously, artists are on their streaming figures. I don't know how that shifted. I don't know if there was a point even in your career where you suddenly realised that the royalty checks for your music had suddenly gone off a cliff, or whether there's been a gradual change.
I don't think I never saw any to start with. So when it all came in,
Right.
it wasn't really made like
Right. Okay. Yeah. Of course.
a huge difference. Um, so yeah, I don't have a huge amount of perspective. I think, to be honest, when I first started doing music, everyone was ripping music for free. Like that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think paying for music had sort of long died in terms of like the youth, really. Um, So it's very difficult. I guess Spotify and some of the streaming service has made it that you have to pay for it, and everyone is paying for it to a certain degree, whether
Mm,
it's free but you're listening to adverts, something's coming in, even though it's just painfully minute. Um,
mm.
I was very, very
I tell
against
you,
it to start with, and then I have sort of U-turned on it.
I think probably the pandemic I think, focus a lot of artists on just the fragility of the nature of their careers. I think you of course, then talking about the pandemic, we're getting through the pandemic. You became pregnant and were later diagnosed with this. Oh, it sounds awful. This rare form of pregnancy-related I can't even say osteoporosis,
Hmm.
which, I mean, it turns out you ended up with, was it 8 broken vertebrae?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mad.
it was wild. Like fast forwarding from that point, yeah, 2 records out with Communion, and then I definitely wanted to take a break. COVID forced that break even more so. Um, and then fell pregnant. I really wanted to have a child, and
Yeah.
yeah, fell pregnant. And then this, yeah, catastrophe happened really, where yeah, my back broke in 8 places, and it went misdiagnosed for a long time, and managed to get better. But yeah, that was definitely the hardest thing I've gone through in my life.
Yeah. Because I don't know. It's is it again at that point where, I mean, nothing else matters about apart from getting better, but it does make you realise, as I say, how fragile everything else is. Because at that point, what can you do apart from just write some songs? You can't go out and play. You can have a voice in terms of recording music, I guess, but I don't know how you got through it.
Yeah, honestly, just I think like my son was the only thing that got me through it. I was so determined to be able to like pick him up and be the mother I really wanted to be for him. Luckily, at the time, obviously, when they're very small, you could sort of just lie on the floor looking at each other with a rattle for hours and playing different things, and he'd be very satisfied. But in terms of getting out and about, I obviously couldn't pick him up or push a pram or do anything. So the number one priority was like, I have to try and get better for him. Um, and music was just, I felt like I'd became a different person during this time, because prior to it, I always felt part of who I was sort of this resilient, determined person, like strong person who, yeah, would find their way through things and be able to figure it out. And then
Mm,
just losing your mobility, like not being able to walk or have any strength in your body. Um, I just became so ashamed and embarrassed, sort of hibernated out of not being able to go out, but also I just didn't even want anyone who knew me prior or knew Lucy Rose to just see what I was or what I had become, because
mm,
it was so far removed from what I felt like I was as a person. So in terms of identity, that was like completely dead in the water, let alone having the courage to then make music. Because I think you do need courage to make music and to believe in yourself. I had neither of those things at all.
mm.
Um, so I think it was only once I started getting better and I got on the other side of things, I was taking Otis out and I was walking to my local coffee shop. Then I felt I had this sudden switch, which is like, wow, you just got through that. Like, wow, you just got through that crazy time. And then that part of my identity came back. And then I was able to sit down and write, but only once I was feeling much, much better.
And did it help then? Did you have a lot of, I guess, things, I guess at that point, was a lot of pent up emotion ready to come out in the songs, or did you decide, I'm going to move on, I'm going to write about the here and now, and I'm not going to write about the past?
Yeah, I kind of the record previous was like really emotional for me, and I poured myself into it, and I felt like there were no boundaries, and it actually became really, really difficult to play live. And so I knew I didn't want to do that. I was like, I don't want to punish myself any more than I need to punish myself here. So when it came to the music, I actually didn't really go near lyrics for a long time. And it was just about the music making me feel good. So it's quite opposite. It
Yeah,
was like, when I sit down at the piano, this is going to make me like fill up my soul again, just playing and being able to do it. So everything came out. It was like a form of escapism rather than delving into it. It was like, I want to forget what I've just lived through. And go somewhere else. And that's the beauty of music, because it hadn't given me that before. It'd always been quite like on the nose about stuff. Um, and then, yeah, all the music, I mean, it was pretty much almost like an instrumental record to start with. And then I was like, I'm going to have to put some words down at some point. But yeah, it was different this time.
So we should mention. So the the new album is out. It's a very fine record. I particularly like the closing track, "The Racket." "Sail Away" as well is one of the tunes I really like on this. Where and now you've been through all of this. Now where do you go next? And are you happy with where you are? Are you content? And most importantly, are you still solvent?
That's a good question. I mean, in some ways, releasing a record is you like building up to it for such a long time, and then it's out in the world, and you're really appreciative of everyone that's listening to it, and then there is this sort of come down experience from it, of especially not touring it, which I'm not. I just did the one show at the Roundhouse. That's been and gone, and I loved. But it's all sort of, yeah, different now, and I'm back home, and I'm like nearly 8 months pregnant with my next kid. So it's what's next. I think actually I'm embracing the unknown, because probably before having Otis, I had this plan of I'll have Otis, and after 3 months I'm going to start doing this, and I'll start, and I think in music generally, managers, labels, all of them, everyone wants like a 3-year plan of what any artist is doing. Like, we need to release continuously, we need to have this strategy. And going through what I've just been through, it's like you just can't. I don't feel like I could plan for what happened, and right now being planless is the thing that makes me almost feel most creative. Like having a baby, doing that, concentrating on baby, and if I feel like the moment takes me, then go and sit at the piano or pick up a guitar. But not having any pressure is what's the most exciting, I think.
Yeah, this comes back to, and we've talked about this before, just how priceless time is. And if all musicians had a bit more money, then they'd have more time. And this has become quite a crisis point for a lot of people who can't pursue a career because they don't have the time. And time's the thing that, money actually can buy you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need. On this, just before I let you go, any advice you would give? Because it's obviously, I think it's even harder now for musicians to, get noticed and to make a living out of music. But is there any advice that you would give to anyone starting out now, or who is, at that level just before, being able to break through?
Gosh, that's so difficult. I've got like the sort of generic advice, which is just about going for it like 110%. But it doesn't feel like the most inspiring. Um, so it's really difficult. I mean, I don't know. Everything that's worked for me so far in my career, I feel like has been down to trying to make real connections with people that care about my music. Like whether it is going around Latin America, and whether it's even like, we talk about it like it's a bad thing, like sleeping on people's floors in America. I can tell you the experience was like 1,000 times better than staying in like hotels, which are disgusting and got nothing. Staying with people that actually care about you and your music, and then waking up in the morning and going, I've cooked breakfast, coffee's on, like, how you doing? Learning about their lives, their experiences. They 100%, those things are all the best experiences I've had in my music career, has been those things. And I don't know, I hope my Latin America trip, and I hoped that me staying with fans would inspire more people to have the sort of blockades removed, because it costs too much to do this. There's a lot of reasons why people can't do what they want to do, but I just think prove them wrong. Like, you prove them wrong. It can be done. Save up that flight, and yeah, get lifts places. Like, it's amazing what people do. Like, when I was in China, I really wanted to go see Great Wall of China, couldn't afford it. Asked at my gig on stage, will anyone take me there? Had like 4 people say, yeah, I'll drive you there tomorrow. So it's just being open, and then having experiences, and I know it sounds, I shouldn't say this, it's like the opposite, we say, like getting in cars with people you don't know, but like believing in the good of people and especially the good of your fans. No one's rooting for you more than the people who like your music.
I think possibly the words "prove them wrong" were the last words you said to me that night in the pub. So I think that's probably
Probably.
it's probably a good probably a good place to end it. Thank you so much. The album, by the way, "This Ain't the Way You Go Out," is out now. Lucy, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We wish you all the best in the future.
Of course. Thank you.
It's Lucy Rose talking to us this week, and well, I hope it gave you some perspective on the musicians' lot. I think there's a lot of what Lucy was saying about her experiences being signed to a major label. And doing things in a slightly different way. Also, just the bravery it takes at some points to say, I need a change, I need to change manager, or I need to do this, or just trying to buck the trend. And I think that's what I've always liked about Lucy is that she won't just do things by the book, and she will always give people a counter argument. And of course, her music's very good as well. I'd recommend the album. Thank you once again to Lucy Rose, our guest. And if you've enjoyed the show, please do subscribe in your podcast app and give us a review and a rating if you can, and maybe tell some friends that we're here. Stuart will be back next time with our regular news update, which I suspect will include news of the new Universal and TikTok deal, which was struck a few days ago, plus the other big stories of the week. And of course, if you have any questions which you'd like artists answered about the workings of the music industry and where the money goes, you can email us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll cover some more of those soon as well. Till next time, look after yourselves. Cheerio.